Welcome back to Sunday Night in America. Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia. These three angels were 9, 8, and 5 years old. They were sisters. I say were because these three little girls are dead, murdered allegedly by their own father.
Peyton, Olivia, and Evelyn deserve justice. The Decker family deserves justice. And this is evil, and we're not going to tolerate it here in our county. And Travis, we are coming for you. He's dangerous and he's an evil that we won't tolerate. Like I said before, we are going to pursue him. He is an adversary to us. And until we find him and hold him accountable for his actions, we won't rest.
Justice is great, but what these precious children really deserve is to be alive. They deserve life, to grow up surrounded by love, to pick out a prom dress or a wedding gown, to learn to drive or pursue a passion. They deserve a chance to hold children of their own. That would be real justice. They will not be around when a jury verdict is read or a sentence imposed. That's the problem with being a homicide investigator or prosecutor. The people you desperately want to help are gone. The death of a child is the most heartbreaking thing we can possibly imagine. The murder of a child shocks our collective conscience. The murder of a child by a parent is something no rational person can comprehend, and yet some have to study it. So maybe one day we can stop it. Joining us are Dr. Adam Lankford, criminology professor, and former special agent Nicole Parker with the FBI. Thank you both for joining us. Dr. Lankford, Susan Smith, Andrea Yates, Alex Murdoch. Parents do kill their children. Is it rare, and is there any research answering that impossible question of why?
Well, it's pretty rare. If you look at all homicides in the United States, about 2 to 3% involve parents killing their children. When it comes to why, there are no good answers, of course. Some of the common motives we've seen include things like they just don't want their child anymore, right? So they would abandon their children or kill them. I don't think that's what happened here because this guy could have just left. We see parents who lose their temper, and so child abuse turns into murder, sometimes by accident. I don't think that happened here either because this does not look like a crime of passion. We see altruism, where parents have this distorted view that their children are suffering and that they're going to commit some sort of mercy killing. But this was so horrible that apparently the girls were found with their wrists bound, bags over their head. That does not sound like a parent, a father killer who is trying to make it a quick and painless death to send them to heaven. We also see cases of spousal revenge, but it's very rare because typically if you have someone who's homicidal who wants revenge against the mother of his children, then he would just try to kill the mother of his children. And then you have things like the unexplainable, psychosis, delusions, hallucinations. Maybe he was hearing voices. Given that these other motives don't seem to fit for this guy, it does make me wonder, was he, we don't diagnose people as crazy per se, but was this really just kind of a crazy act that will never make sense?
Special Agent Dr. Lankford raises the next point I want to ask. I'm sure there are many viewers, including me, who are wondering why these three little girls were allowed an unsupervised visit with someone who clearly had mental health issues.
Right, Trey, that's a very important question. And as a former FBI agent, I can tell you that the most difficult cases to work and investigate are the death of children and the murder of children by a parent. I mean, it's just absolutely shattering and heartbreaking. So when we think about why were they allowed to be with their father, obviously there was a court order that had allowed visitation every other weekend between certain hours. But again, when this decline happened, there was a mental decline, and the ex-wife had actually filed a restraining order saying, there's a decline, we're seeing signs, and there were many things that were not right. And so the fact that they were still allowed to be with their father alone is wrong. And the fact that that occurred and that was not stopped, in hindsight's always 20/20, right? But his mental decline, he had had a car accident, there were issues at work, he was homeless. There were one thing after another. But again, he should not have been alone with those minor girls. And it's heartbreaking. They should still be alive, and this was preventable.
Dr. Lankford, Andrea Yates was legally insane. Susan Smith was just diabolical. John Benet Ramsey was the victim of homicide. Is there research into whether mothers or fathers are more likely to kill children? Are the motives different for mothers and fathers? You've already touched on one. I mean, the motive that I saw most often was the father wanted to inflict the most amount of pain on the mother, so therefore he killed the child. But is there research on which parent's more likely to do it, and are their motives different depending on the gender?
Yeah, there is some research, and you mentioned some high-profile cases of mothers who killed their children. So people might be surprised or maybe not as surprised that the data suggests it's about 50-50, depending on the specific years you study, the countries where you're looking. But, even though it's about 50-50, I think it's important to point out that a lot of fathers just take themselves out of the equation. They're absentee. So, if we kind of make an adjustment and say, like, given that mothers spend much more time with their children than fathers overall, whether they're married or they're single, on a per hour basis, I think it's clear that children are safer with their mothers than their fathers, at least when it comes to this type of kind of like extreme violence.
Special Agent, I'm sure the killer of these 3 girls will be found dead or alive. I hope dead. What can be done to reduce the need for tiny caskets in the future? I mean, this is, look, you never get used to these stories. I don't care how many different cases you have, you never get immune to it. Is there something we can do, or is this just human nature at its worst?
Well, we really are fighting a battle between good and evil. That is something that I saw as an FBI special agent every single day. But it's important to note that he was an Army combat veteran. He was suffering from PTSD. He had borderline personality disorder. He had a mental health decline, one thing after another. He had been seeking counseling. He had been talking to a pastor out of Georgia, and he had discontinued that. I would say first and foremost, those that serve our country in those types of capacities, Veteran Affairs Services, they need to make sure that they are receiving the top sort of mental health counseling and therapy that they need to help them with their PTSD. I know a lot of people that have mental health issues. They do not go out and kill others. That is never an excuse. It is inexcusable. That is wrong. The other thing is that the mother had actually encouraged that they activate the Amber Alert system, and for whatever reason, the state of Washington did not activate that Amber Alert system, and she believes that that could have helped in saving her children's lives. Obviously, they were on, like I said, a court-ordered visitation. He had the right to visit them, and so they're going to look into that and investigate why that wasn't activated. She thinks that might have helped, but again, helping our veterans to get mental health services is important, and activating those Amber Alert services. And again, I cannot say thank you enough to the law enforcement officers from federal, state, and local who have worked hard to bring justice to this evil act.
I would also add judges. When in doubt, don't let people who may be homicidal around children. I thank you both. This is an awful story to cover, but I thank you for coming on a Sunday night to talk about what's something not one of the 3 of us would like to talk about.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.